Back in the 1980s, British Rail still operated boat trains from the ferries, connected to various parts of the UK. And thanks to TrainSim, we can relive one of the longest, from Harwich to Glasgow via Birmingham New Street. In part 1, we'll start off down the Mayflower line, connecting with the Great Eastern Mainline at Manningtree. At Stratford, we'll change motive power from electric to a Class 37 diesel for a brief spell on the North London line, before raising the pantograph again with the Class 86 and gain some speed on the West Coast Mainline to Watford Junction. Hello, welcome to Harwich, Parks and Quay. We're going to take the European service, this amazing scenario from, I want to say Harry, Barry, Vary, and I'm sure I've pronounced it really badly, but it's a 6-part scenario from Alan Thomson Sim, and it represents this full run from Harwich in East Anglia all the way through to Glasgow Central. We're going to do it in 3 parts on my YouTube channel, but thoroughly looking forward to this. This is the Class 86 as it was repainted at this time the previous year to mark 21 years of intercity, and it was kind of a representation of the original electric blue style. It was a bit controversial because the actual shading is British Rail blue rather than electric blue, but it's got the lion for the logo instead of the British Rail logo, and of course it's got yellow front ends as well. The original ones didn't have that, but they had to do that at the time. And in TrainSim you can always travel back in time, because this is the spring of 1988 and this is going to be one of the last runs of this particular service. So let's get the train set up. As the master key is on. AWS is on and we've done the test. You also have to remember the brake has a bit of a release key on it as well. That's the R button. Put the instrument lights on, headlights on as well. Now we'll start loading the passengers. We are due away at 7:51. The ferry passengers have had about 20 minutes to board this from about 7:30, and it's nearly a 9-hour journey all told to get through to Glasgow. And we're going to start off on the Just Trains Mayflower line through to Manningtree. The original Dovetail Games Great Eastern Mainline from Liverpool Street to Ipswich included the tracks on this part of the line, but there was no scenery, so the Just Trains add-on puts that in. Quite old now. Now I can hear something outside before we go, and here we have a Class 101 Metcam DMU on a local service. We've got the board on there. Charter Special it says. So let's get going. Love to hear the sounds on this Class 86. Massively helped by the Armstrong Powerhouse sound pack. Of course, always remembering that you have to notch up. And that's a mistake I've read about on the forums with people. They're just not quite sure what to do. But you have to make sure that the ammeter's there, that you don't go into the red area. The later electrics, and it started with 87101 Stevenson, and then the class 90s and all the electrics after that didn't require this intensive notching up scenario. But the early trains did. It's fairly slow out of Harwich initially, 25 miles per hour. Well, that's quite a sight, isn't it? Can boost the speed up a little bit, up to 40 now. They stopped doing this long service in May of 1988, and it's kind of not difficult to understand why it wasn't very successful, because it takes something like over 9 hours to get from Harwich to Glasgow. Of course, at Carstairs it'll split with another portion going off to Edinburgh. You really can't see the benefit of it, but to see plenty of old locos and stock as well, and little freight work in there with the class 37. Very nicely created, this run. This Just Trains add-on to adding the scenery into Manningtree has been out for absolutely ages, but I've never really felt the inclination to buy it before. It wasn't until this scenario came in, and I thought, that's right up my street. The only benefit I can think of really is if you're a foot passenger and you had a lot of baggages with you, your luggage was substantial, then I suppose there's a little benefit in having a train where you didn't have to change trains, because otherwise surely there was a much faster way getting to London Liverpool Street and then getting a faster train to Scotland from Euston. But at least you're on one train, I suppose. So although this is an old add-on from Just Trains, looks pretty decent, and it's probably benefited, I think, by the recent Armstrong Powerhouse vegetation pack upgrade. It's my first run with this scenery add-on, and I have to say straight away it takes me back, because about 20 years ago for Microsoft Train Simulator we had a wonderful add-on called Great Eastern, and that was the full-blown line from London Liverpool Street to Ipswich. We got this Harwich branch on, we'd got the Southend branch, the Clapton branch, the Braintree branch. There was a whole plethora of stock that came with it as well. You had the 86s, you had all sorts of EMUs from the old 302s and 305s, the Clapton units, the 309s, and then the more recent stuff, the 315s, the 317s. There was parcel units on there as well, I seem to remember. Everything from Mark 1, Mark 2, freight, stock, and all for about £20, and it provided a great deal of entertainment, I have to say. Probably one of the best add-ons ever, and for the time, scenery was pretty top-notch as well. I certainly remember doing the Harwich to London Liverpool Street run at the time. There was a scenario on there. It was non-stop, and I think it was a class 47. I think at the time, I don't think this section was electrified to Manningtree. We'll see a train emerge in a minute. This is better. Kind of interesting to see. I think the stock on this service was supplied by ScotRail up in Glasgow, and it's a combination of Mark II air-conditioned stock predominantly, in a mixture of liveries, intercity. There's even one ScotRail carriage, British Rail Blue, and then we have the staple that existed at the time, which was the Mark I buffet car. I remember so many times travelling on Class 86s, not so much on this line in real life back in the 80s, but more on the West Coast Mainline. I always find with this notching up thing, once you get over 40 odd miles an hour, then you're kind of okay then to apply full power. You aren't going to blow the ammeters. Relatively tricky trying to maintain the speeds on these sort of fairly low speed bits, because you can have quite a descent as we've got now. So you're trying to maintain the speed limit but not go over. Said on some of these videos before, I love the rattling over the points. It's very well done on this particular train. Armstrong Powerhouse enhancement pack for this Class 86 really brings this old unit to life. So we've got the first warning board for the drop in speed to 35 miles per hour, and then very shortly after that it's 25 for the approach to Manningtree. Then we'll join up with the Great Eastern Mainline proper. We have to be a little bit careful here because we have a single yellow. So that kind of suggests there is perhaps a Norwich train coming off on the main line. I'll keep a keen lookout for the red signal as well. Here's the AWS marker. Marker the ramp. Sometimes these signals are slightly tricky to see. Now we're on yellow, so I think we're signalled into the platform. We're okay. See a Class 37 on a freight working. Tanker. This feels a little bit like we're in the middle of nowhere at Manningtree. Nerves ourselves into a gentle stop. there's one or two decent walks you can do around here. There's the guard's whistle, so we'd better get going. Quite a cloudy, overcast day. Colchester the next stop, so just to provide a bit of detail, so on this part 1 we've made that stop at Manningtree, so Colchester, then Shenfield, which predominantly you would tend to think is only stopped up by more local services, then Stratford and Watford Junction. I'm not sure there's too many Norwich services that stop at Shenfield, maybe perhaps some at peak time. I'm using the power brake controller in controlling the train. I'm not sure it's perfectly designed for this particular train, but it's just better than just doing it directly with the keyboard. It makes it a bit more exciting, and don't regret the investment on the power brake controller. So for the first time we've got 100 miles per hour as the speed limit. Pretty much get there as far as Chelmsford. A very good job with the notching up. I think we'll be able to, yeah, we've got power again now, that's it. I like the look of that. That was a double-headed 37 on a Freightliner working, because much freight, not just to Harwich, the port of Harwich, but Felixstowe as well. The Felixstowe line is represented on this add-on. One of the first add-ons to be produced by Dovetail Games, and showing its age a little bit, but as I say, with the new vegetation pack, it's a bit better, I think. Very much looking forward as well to the upgraded one, the modern day Gemma as it's known, from Alan Thomson Simulation. They're working on an upgraded one with a new catenary, bring it right up to speed, and then we're going to get the Flirt, which of course is used nowadays on this line. I suppose I've always got a little bit of a preference for these old stock workings really. Delighted when I saw this scenario come out. I thought, what a great idea. When we get into the next part, it'll be the Class 37 from Stratford through to Watford Junction. That'll be on the North London lines. We'll take the 37 as far as Camden Road before switching to the back to the Class 86. But it's kind of what train sim, I would say it was what it was built for, but we've got to that stage, and TSW4, Train Sim World 4, the graphics are obviously stunning, but the routes tend to be relatively short, and we just don't have this scope. And to be able to do a full run from Harwich to Glasgow is absolutely amazing. You know, when I first saw this being available, I thought, wow, this is what I've got to do. I'm trying to split it into 3 parts overall. I mean, this is parts 1, 2 and 3 right in one go. So it's a 6-part run on that you can download, but I'm going to do it in 3. About spied another Class 86 on the Norwich working. The real line itself was only electrified north of Colchester in the 1980s. In the original electrification to Colchester and Clacton Southend's, that was one of the very early electrification projects. But the Norwich services always were diesel hauls with 37s, 47s, 40s occasionally. I think early on. First reminder that we're not too far away from our stop at Colchester. Got the Clacton line coming in on our left. To see the Clacton line built for Train Sim, and in particular if we could get the old Clacton 309 EMUs. Speaking of EMUs, we have a 321 here at Colchester arriving into the Bay platform. Now, the pedantics people will say, but hang on a minute, the 321s weren't released until the following year into service. It's a little bit of artistic license because we don't have any 309s in the game. And they certainly look the part and fit in with the idea that this was British Rail in kind of the networked southeast era. See quite a few bits of stock around at Colchester in the sheds as well. Something I do from time to time, fortunately. I press the wrong function key instead of having F3 to get rid of all the HUD. The site of the ubiquitous Mark 1 buffet car. They only finally got rid of the Mark 1 buffet cars in the 1980s when they started to, I think they called it modular catering, but it meant more of an ability to microwave stuff. We started to then see pretty much widespread Mark 3 buffet cars used. I don't know whether they had to do an extra build of them, I really can't remember, but I don't think there was a great supply of them in the 1970s, apart from mainly on the HSDs. Perhaps it was when the sleeper cars were built, the Mark III sleeper cars, because they weren't in the original Mark III builds either. They came in the 1980s. I remember walking through one at Derby open day, a sleeper car, brand new build in the very early 80s, about 1982. Sheffield, the next stop. When we get to Sheffield, you really will feel as though we're into commuter belt. Of course, the regular stopping service from Sheffield into Liverpool Street. That was the preserve of the 317s until very recently. Now, of course, it's the 345s and the Elizabeth line. The 317s, they only stopped using them a couple of... Did I say 317s? I meant 315s. They only stopped using them in the last couple of years. Approaching Marks Tay. We've got the brunch line off to the right to Sudbury. That was included in that Naked Tracks Microsoft Train Sim route. Don't think I'm even capable of being able to load up the Microsoft Train Sim and make it work. Nowadays, I think it takes a bit of work, but I'd love to see an old video of that route because it really was a labour of love. Probably about the best. I'm sure it was only about £20 odd. I know that's 20 years ago, but it provided absolutely hours and hours of entertainment. It's kind of provided an interest for me in the Great Eastern Mainline. Probably been on it 2 or 3 times in real life. It's not kind of my neck of the woods, but there's a charm about it. Busy old line as well. Show just how much train sim has come on to have so much of the railway network built that we can do a full run from Harwich to Glasgow. When we get onto the North London line, that's the backdated North London line, and that really is set in Network Southeast mode. There's a version 5 of that coming out soon. That also includes the branch, I'm saying soon, it's certainly in development, but that includes the St Albans Abbey branch from Watford Junction as well. Kind of reminds me that I probably haven't had full value out of the original download. I mean, that was free, backdated train sim. Well worth some of the runs that are capable on there as well. press 4, you can actually choose which angle it was going to work. It doesn't always do that fly past like that. If there is a way, I've not found it yet. Awful lot of level crossings. Presumably, if you've just come from the Hook of Holland and you're arriving at Harwich at 7:30 in the morning, it was an overnight thing, so you'd probably be pretty tired as a passenger on this service. Just how many, I just wonder though how many people actually did the full run from Harwich all the way through to Glasgow. Ultimately, I'm sure that's why it just wasn't very successful. Even if you were joining the train at Watford, and it becomes a kind of a regular Glasgow service, but via Birmingham, it's never the fastest. There we have the branch to Braintree. The 321 of the main platform might just have been on a Braintree service. Single track. I think with the Class 86-4 and the Mark II carriages, when we get to the West Coast Mainline, it'll be 100-mile-an-hour running. I don't think we'll be going into the 110 mode. Of course, it will suggest 125, but of course, it's a modern version of the route, the West Coast Mainline south route, so allows for Pendolino runs. So I'll try and stick to the correct speed limit to the 100. See Class 85s as well on that section. It'd be lovely if we could have the 81s, the 82s, 83s, maybe the 84s, but I'd particularly love to see some first gen EMUs as well. We've just got a real void of those. We've only really got the 303s from old school British Rail, but love to see 304s, 310s, 312s maybe. Dual carriageway that is alongside us now kind of signifies we're not too far away from Chelmsford, the county town of Essex. Again, you do get express services stopping there, but the majority of trains that stop at Chelmsford tend to be the stopping services. exactly when the DVTs were first used on the Norwich Liverpool Street services. They used to operate originally without a DVT, just with a normal brake carriage at the end. And to begin with, they used the, I think they were called DBSO? Or was that just a normal brake carriage? But either way, they were the DVTs that were used on the Glasgow Queen Street to Edinburgh push-pull services. Class 47s. You've got the reduction down to 85, then straight after that down to 60. Just make you wonder, why on earth have you got two reductions in speed so close together? Why don't they just bring you down straight to 60? Quite a bend, I think, through Chelmsford Station, which is kind of why we have this 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, I presume. No idea how well represented Chelmsford Station and the surroundings are. I think we've got, is it Chelmsford Bus Station right next to Chelmsford Railway Station? I think that looks like a realistic custom build. I believe you don't see Chelmsford Cathedral, which is a bit of a faux pas. Edge your way through Chelmsford Station. I think having had that run of 100 miles an hour for most of the way to Chelmsford, I don't think we'll get another 100 section now. I think it'll be 80s, 85, 90. Speed-wise, though, it certainly gathers speed pretty quickly. A great old servant. You can still see one or two examples of Class 86s left, even to this day. You've got the Heritage one in 86, is it 101? And the Les Ross one is still in active use as well. And I think there was the one that was used on the Caledonian sleeper as well until the introduction of the Mark V stop. Plenty of videos around on YouTube, the full Norwich to Liverpool Street run, particularly back in the day, not massively great picture quality. There's the old video 125 run of an 86 on this full run as well. Waiting for years and put a great deal of effort in with some massive custom builds and all sorts of stuff on the line out from Liverpool Street through to places like Stansted Airport and eventually to Cambridge, but hopefully that will see the light of day at some point. Can't criticise because this route building can take years and years and years and years of work, and it's okay if you've got a group, there's a company and you're doing it absolutely every day, there's a number of people. If you're doing it as a one-man job, then you've got to be pretty dedicated. Just a charm about some of these stations on the Great Eastern Mainline. You can almost imagine, sort of minus the catenary, would have looked exactly the same back in steam days, essentially. No other way of getting to the West Coast Mainline other than going via the North London line, but that's kind of the slow part of the operation really, and I think even then joining the West Coast Mainline's a tad slow. Southend line joining us now. first sight of 317s on the... I've said 317s again, haven't I? Sorry, my brain's not in gear today, is it? 315s on the local service to Liverpool Street. Interesting to see them in the original British Rail blue livery, and here we have one departing. So we have the right of way. Respond to the guard there. Oh yeah, actually we can do that, can't we? I've forgotten that with the C button. We can actually respond to him that way. Now that 315 will have a massively head start on us. But it is a all station service to London Liverpool Street, so we will overtake it at some point. That'll be making its first stop at Brentwood. But completely different beast really. We've got the power behind us, but they're not the quickest in the opening bit really. Just remember this era so well because in the late 70s, early 80s, it was pretty much all British Rail blue. The overall corporate image was just blue and grey. And although I think people look back on those liveries now with great fondness, but at the time it just felt a bit boring because every train was exactly the same. And then suddenly there was this splash of colour that came in when British Rail became sectorised. So we had the intercity colours, we had rail freight colours, and all the various bits, regional railways as well. But then this was originally called London South East, and you had for a brief while Jaffa Cake colours as they were generally known, and they would look pretty smart. But then Chris Green came in from ScotRail to take over this particular region, and he called it sector, he called it Network South East, and of course introduced the red, white and blue colours, the red lampposts at the stations. We'll get a look at that when we do the backdated North London lines, because you might spy a glimpse of the Olympic Stadium when we get to Stratford, but you won't see it on the backdated one, because that's as it was in the 1980s when Stratford was a little bit more dark and dingy and certainly underdeveloped anyway. Massively different place these days. Said we'd eventually get past that 315. Here we are about to. We are, of course, on the fast lines, the up fast, whereas that's on the slow lines. Of course, up because we're heading towards London. Okay, we're not getting as far as London Liverpool Street, but this is the up Liverpool Street line. And if you're coming away from London, generally it's always the down line. It doesn't matter whether you're going north, south, generally east or west for that matter. Speeding a bit here, it's downhill this section. Sharp downhill gradients. Real charm, these old stations on this section. All the old canopies are still in place, the old station buildings. Labyrinth of lines at Gideon Park. I think some of the peak time trains still terminate at Gideon Park. Gideon Park station itself. Street service from Shenfield. About every 20 minutes, something like that. Maybe 15. We're about to pass through Romford now. I think of Steve Davies for some reason. This was very much his neck of the woods. Played at the snooker club. Was run at the time by Barry Hearn. The two of them, of course, that lifelong collaboration. The Upminster line as well, a relatively short branch. Don't think that's included on this. I'm kind of feeling it's on is it the Crouch Valley line? I don't know whether you can still download that, because it was an old UK train sim thing. It was looking quite dated in terms of what we have in terms of modern route building. I think it had got the Upminster line as well as scenery through to Southend. Again, that's no criticism of any of these route builders, because I'm sure they've spent months of their lives building some of these routes. Yes, another 315. It's a great tribute, really. Armstrong powerhouse, the fact that we have both the 315 and the 317, and that's if we see it. I think we do see that on the West Coast Mainline, the 321s as well. And the track itself as well is basically an Armstrong powerhouse track upgrade, but then there's another reskin from Alan Thomson Sim, which makes them look like this. I quite like this look. That's the sheds at Romford, another 321, and a load of 86s in the yard. Did I say Romford or Ilford? I meant Ilford anyway. This is Ilford. Take us into the heart of Ilford Station. Then the flyover here on the right, you can see another 315 going over it. That takes the slow lines over to our left hand side for the remainder of our trip on the Great Eastern Mainline. It's incredible just how busy this route is. Next stage in a class 37 as well, that'll be interesting. So you have to keep in mind there, that was a double yellow. Because it remains to be seen whether we've got clearance right into Stratford station itself, platform 10. Many drivers will tell you that it's very common to get held at Maryland just before Stratford itself. Just go full on with these brakes. This is Maryland Station. Another 315 there on the Shenfield service on our left. I've sat on the platform to the left quite a few times here at Maryland at rush hour time. It's just an amazing sight because you get all sorts of stuff coming through. Empty stop workings as well. And we're okay, we're green. You don't get sight of that signal until you virtually pass the canopy. I wonder if it's that bad in real life. There are signals that are not easy to spot in real life. We've got a double-headed 37 on a Freightliner run. That's probably come off the North London line. Slow down because of the potential of the red signal, and then we don't want to be going too fast, but we need to make our way steadily into platform 10 here at Stratford. So if you see any sight of the Olympic buildings, just pretend it's not here, because it wouldn't have been in 1988, and then it won't be when we relaunch the next part in the backdated train sim run. So very shortly we'll rejoin this, and it'll be a class 37 at the helm. So here we are then in the hands of the Class 37. This is going to take us on the next part of our journey through to Camden Road. So first of all, we've got to switch cabs. Set ourselves up. So we have to do this AWS thing on the back. Forward. Because we are a light engine, so we're obviously moving away at speed. A very common thing in the 1980s, the idea of swapping locos, diesel to electric. It was done all the time. You take a typical day at Birmingham New Street and you would see it happening maybe hundreds of times a day. It's a lost art nowadays. You tend to see top and tails where there's a engine at each end, but of course this was necessary because you'll see part of the next run doesn't have the overhead electric lines. can see the track worker in situ. Also got to be mindful that we don't want to hit this train too hard. Probably doing this a bit too fast actually, I think. Now, yeah, if you can just get the cursor in the right place. So we are connected up to the train now. Right, so now we're away. Of course, we have to be a little bit mindful of the fact that we've got a really heavy train, so it's kind of pointless putting full power on. You're just going to blow the ammeters. We talked about blowing the ammeters on the Class 86. Isn't it? It's only about 6 miles as things start to get to Camden Road. This is just about the only way of reaching the West Coast Mainline. The whole of the bit to Camden Road had overhead electrification at the time. It doesn't. Sorry, it didn't have at the time, but it does now. This is the age of the North London line, way before the Olympics, which came in 2012, so very different situation. And you'll see red lampposts galore on our run through to Watford Junction. Class 313, which were in use at the time on the North London line services from Richmond. They were dual mode, so you got third rail, which we've got here, and they could also do the overhead line stuff, so ideal units. One of the reasons why they were built in that fashion. then, as is now, there was an absolute proliferation, easy for me to say, proliferation of freight services. And we had all the stuff from Harwich, from Felixstowe as well, to gain access to the West Coast Mainline, and it was very much the West Coast Mainline is the key route for freight traffic through the Midlands and the North. Far more take the West Coast Mainline, for example, than the East Coast Mainline. We got a pair of 31s here on a freight liner working. Like a one-man band though, because I'm sure in reality this would have been driven by a Stratford-based driver, and the driver of the Class 86 would have just sat in the cab and watched all this go on. I think once we get to Camden Road, then the next bit will be the Class 37 will depart and go off to Wembley, but we're not driving that bit. It's nice to be able to give the 37 a spin. Great seeing the outside views. The problem is you don't hear the AWS going off. I'm trying to not miss anything because that will set the emergency brakes off. To see a few more scenarios on this route. I mean, the backdated route itself is fantastic because it means that this journey itself is possible, because we had the North London line done by Dovetail Gauge, we had the West Coast Mainline South, which connected Euston to Watford and Birmingham and beyond, but the two never been merged until this came out, so this makes this entirely possible. Then where you possibly can, it's nice if you're changing routes, which is necessary and good actually, because it means you don't have to do it all in one go, but it's good if you just do it at the stations. It makes it feel a bit more realistic, a natural break, a natural pause. the various wagons that Armstrong Powerhouse in particular, and there's one or two Just Trains ones as well have been produced. Very much the North London line as it was in the 80s. It was in quite a rundown state. Fascinating to watch some of the YouTube videos about in the 1980s. There's some old Thames News clips which capture just how rundown it really was, and you felt as though British Rail were very much trying to move towards closing the thing. It's kind of like the old thing, and this is obviously only my opinion, but it's like when we decimate the railway and you don't run a very good service, then eventually people won't use it. Now it's thriving. There's millions of people transported across the North London line. It's such a great east to west route. Those signals, that was a single yellow. Just overdoing it slightly with the braking and then trying to power away a bit too fast. You can't just set this thing into maximum and think it'll respond. It requires a little bit more love and care than that. Actually getting a AWS reminder for this signal, but it certainly is red. Love all the distant scenery that's been put in. It gives you that feeling that you're very much in the heart of London. You always doubt with train sim a little bit when you have a red signal. Are we going to get a train that passes us by and it clears? But I think we will. Yeah, I think we've got one there. It is. It's going through now. And this is again one of the reasons why this wasn't the best service in the world, because you weren't exactly given top priority. The signalman taking preference there over the stopping service. You almost feel at this point, well, where's the overhead electric lines? Because we're less than a mile away. There's no sight of them yet, but we'll soon see them come into view. We're very much this is a drag to get the train into the overhead line position. Right, okay, so we've got a yellow. Again, kind of a bit over anxious to get that thing into 50 mile an hour. That's when we won't move. Gently does it. Careful here because that was only a single yellow. And I'm kind of assuming that that train in front of us is stopping at Camden Road. See the start of the overhead lines coming back again. We've got a single yellow now. Now are we cleared to the platform? Might be okay on that front. Worth reflecting there. Sometimes signals can be a bit confusing because you could see a glimpse of a red, but it was actually the one to the right, which is now clear to yellow. This one's clear to yellow too. And again we have our faithful trackman, because nowadays rail track sort these things out. And here we are at Camden Road. A couple of 31s stabled there waiting for their next duty. So we're back in the cab of the Class 86 and we're just waiting for that 37 to disappear now. Would have been really good if we could have got the driver to drive it for us all the way from Stratford through to here, but I think that's probably testing the ability of Train Sim Classic rather too much. Away it goes. You almost get the feeling that that Class 37 has just gone through a red signal, but we'll pretend it didn't. And if you got any doubts at all before this run really as to why this service wasn't particularly successful, then you're probably getting a feeling for it now. It was just so slow and cumbersome, and for the life of me I can't understand why this change wasn't done at Watford Junction. It would make much more sense to do it at its next stop, but I suppose then, as now, Watford Junction very busy, and perhaps the time taken up in the platform just would have held up the normal West Coast Mainline traffic. So we're just waiting for that red signal in front of us to clear, and we should get the go ahead quite soon. That's why we haven't quite got the clearance yet. We're waiting for that freight train to come across, I think. But we've got the clearance now. We're okay. Real nostalgia fest in terms of the old traction. I have to say, this scenario right from the very start. And for all the fact that this part of the run is quite slow, it's good to see the North London line being used a little bit more in Train Sim. We are very shortly going to join the West Coast Mainline, Primrose Hill. Looks like we are going to be held. point in going really fast towards this red signal. This is, of course, the West Coast Mainline. There we are, Class 87 on the down fast. A 317 coming through, edging its way into Euston. And we've now got a green signal, so we can at last go. I think it was the 317 that was probably the thing holding us up. Takes a little bit of work because we're on a climb, of course. So for the next few miles at least, we are on the slow lines. Going through the tunnel, you can get a better view of the ammeters a little bit more. So at least we've got clearance for 75 very, very soon. Did quite a decent job with the catenary. It's quite representative of the old original Mark 1 catenary. I'm sure every single gantry isn't exactly perfect, but it's pretty decent. See a Class 85 there. That was something that came out a year or two back from backdated train sim. Here at Queen's Park we've got the Bakerloo line coming in. There's a little bit of confirmation for us, so at the moment we're on the down slow, so we'll be routed onto the down fast the other side of Wembley. And as I'm recording this, we've had a bit of news today that the Trainsim World 4 route from Gospel Oak to Barking will be coming out, so that's kind of a branch away from the North London line, but it'll also mean there's the possibility of using the new Class 7 10 Adventurers on this route as well. So you obviously won't be able to do it on Trainsim World 4 from Euston, but at least it'll be possible to do a run from Queen's Park through to Harrow and Wealdstone. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if somebody eventually does a full mod which allows for the full timetable. That'd be quite decent, to be driving a Bakerloo line train to be held at Queen's Park for a train off the main line. Slightly different perspective in many ways doing this from the slow lines, because since this route's been out, it's been out a while now from Dovetail Games. I'm not totally sure if I've ever actually ridden this bit on the slow lines. Kind of ignore slightly Wembley Stadium on the right, because of course this is supposed to be 1988, so it would be the old Wembley and the Twin Towers. I did mean to have a look and see into the old West Coast Mainline 5.3 route that's available, to see if I could find an old model of the original Wembley, but I've not got round to it. Wembley Central. Single yellow. So presumably the train that was mentioned needs to overtake us first before we get clearance onto the down fast line. As you just saw, class 317. They were very much in use at the time on the local services. As far as Birmingham New Street as well, it was quite strange to see a Network Southeast liveried EMU at Birmingham New Street, but they were on the stopping New Street to Euston trains. Of course, some of them would go to Northampton, some to Milton Keynes. So I think that train that's just passed us is our reason why we're being held, because we are going to be signalled onto the fast lines. There we are, we're already got the single yellow, so we can carry on. Hope you're not finding the picture quality noticeably different. I had to actually drop down one setting to get this scenario to work, and it's a long time since that's happened on Train Sim, but I think it's basically, it's not so much the AI traffic, but just the fact that after Camden Road you've got the whole of the West Coast Mainline to London Euston and the little stretch around there. I think that particular tile was causing it all sorts of problems. Relatively slow acceleration, I would imagine that by the time we get to the next signal we should be clear, because that electric came through at full speed. We do have a neutral section though. Great to see those represented, I have to say. You hear the pop of the electric motors being cut out, and then back to power again. I'm no electrician, so I couldn't really explain the reasoning why they have to have that gap in the power, but it certainly is necessary. And of course, I'm sure drivers are fully trained on this, but they would know that if they happen to be on a straight piece of track and they stop the train absolutely dead in the neutral section with the pantograph raised, you wouldn't be able to move the train. I'm sure it's happened. And we are going to try and obey the rules today, so tells us 125 mile an hour is the maximum speed, but of course this is 1988 and we're operating a Class 86 with Mark II stock, and you'll see a little sign there, maximum speed 100 miles an hour. So we're going to try and pretty much keep to that. Of course, not long after this video they'd have been using 321s on the local services. And the 317s were cascaded onto the East Coast Mainline for services out of King's Cross to Cambridge. They might have been used out of Liverpool Street as well. This is Harrow and Wealdstone, so the terminus of the Bakerloo line. And there was a time when they used to carry on to Watford Junction. There is a Watford station on the tube, but it's actually on the Metropolitan line. I've not seen massively a great deal of, and I don't know the age of the person who created this lovely scenario pack, but the preserve of the non-DVT services at the time was the full Mark 1 brake car. You used to see them on virtually every service. With the 87s and the Mark III stock, it was possible at this time to have 110 mile an hour runs on the West Coast Mainline. Bushy, the line deviating away through to Watford High Street. And eventually onto Watford Junction, but we're taking the more direct route into the platforms at Watford Junction. Industrial park there. Sorry, not industrial park, the retail park, I should say. And now you've got the DC lines coming Coming back into view again now, and I think we might even see a 313 in the platform. Two of them, in fact. Well, that's the end of this first part. So in the next part, we'll go through to Birmingham New Street and then on to Preston. Well, I hope so much that you've enjoyed this run so far. And as I say, all credit to the creator of this superb set of scenarios to do this full run all the way up to Glasgow Central via Birmingham New Street. So that's it from this first part of the run, which is the first 3 parts of the scenario. And if you've enjoyed it, then I'd be grateful if you could like and subscribe. That will always help me a great deal on this my YouTube channel. But until then, from me for now, it's goodbye.